Welcome class, we're now in week 8, so there's only 4 more weeks left to this class. And usually in week 10, that's when I start announcing the last day of class. And so this week we're going to cover transition words and how to write a comparison-contrast essay, and I will also go over how to write a persuasive essay for next week's persuasive essay post. So next week when you write your persuasive essay post, you should have a minimum of 3 paragraphs. So you would have your introduction paragraph, then you have your one body paragraph, and 1 conclusion paragraph. And that's it for your persuasive essay post. And this is just one separate essay. You don't have to do a writing process for the persuasive essay. It's just a one-time deal of the week 9 forum. So that's why it's shortened, just those 3 paragraphs. So that's what you're going to be doing for your week 9 forum. And then for the week 8 forum, you're just going to upload your essay number 2. And then you're going to upload the rough draft and then peer review just like you did in week 4 and 5 for essay 1. And so for your essay 2, we're in the pre-writing stage of the writing process where we are deciding what our topic is, deciding our outline, our thesis statement, that sort of thing. So we're going over the structure and writing out our second essay, comparison, where you're comparing 2 things, comparison contrast essay. And so this particular this particular lecture will then go over how you can have many different ways of saying and, for, so, and, for, instead of saying coordinating conjunction and all the time. So you would use transition words of addition. So, and as the class progresses, you're going to notice fewer and fewer people coming in, especially with all the quizzes. No more quizzes anymore. So that means that you're supposed to be very good at your English grammar. I will then cover a little more, and then in week 9, my week 9 lecture is going to be about what is a persuasive essay. Week 10 is going to be how to do the worksheet, week 10 worksheet and APA, as well as about media bias and media literacy and fake news. Week 11, I'm going to go over how to write a science paper. And then week 12, I will go over different kinds of introduction, in different kinds of body paragraph, and different kinds of conclusion paragraph. And then after week 12, you're done with the class. Okay, so let's start. I'll start sharing my screen right now. And let's see, there it goes. So I will start. Can you guys see the week 8 instructor session? So can you see the week 8 instructor session? Let me stop sharing for a second. So can you guys see could you guys see what I was sharing? I'll have to take that to mean yes. So in the week 8 instructor session, all you have to do in the week 8 forum is that you just upload your rough draft to the week 8 forum, and then you peer review each other's rough draft just like you did in the previous forum in week 4 and 5 for your essay 1. So we are still in the pre-writing stage of essay 2, where you are perfecting your thesis statement and making sure your topic sentences match your thesis. In the week 8 forum, you can peer review each other's papers by going over the essay structure, punctuation, or grammar errors, and or recommend APA sources and APA in-text citations for other students to help other students improve their grades. For week 8, you have 2 activities, the week 8 forum and the week 8 assignment rough draft worksheet, just like your week 2 rough draft worksheet. Here's an example of your week 8 assignment worksheet. So your thesis would be like, fruits are better than vegetables because of their cost, nutrition, and taste. Then your second paragraph is going to be about cost. Then your third paragraph is going to be about nutrition. And then your fourth paragraph is going to be about taste. And so here you have your subpoints. Provide an overview of the 3 subpoints you will discuss in your essay: cost, nutrition, taste. And then body paragraph 2 will be about cost. Fruits are cheaper than vegetables. And then you write, why are fruits cheaper than vegetables? because apples, pears, and strawberries are all fruits that have natural sugars in them that make them taste sweet, that can be combined with chocolate. And then the second one is 2, taste. Fruits taste better than vegetables. Did I just do that wrong? Yeah, I think I just said, I said that fruits are cheaper than vegetables. So here you have 3 examples of vegetables that are cheaper, that fruits that are cheaper than vegetables. Then you have fruits taste better than vegetables because fruits have natural sugar. You can combine fruits with chocolate or combine fruits with caramel. And then fruits have more nutritional value than vegetables because fruits have vitamin C, antioxidants, and vitamin A. And then in your conclusion paragraph, you restate in different words the thesis statement as the first sentence of the conclusion. So then I didn't paraphrase it, but you can paraphrase it, and you would write fruits taste better than vegetables because of their taste, cost, and nutrition. And then you summarize these main points in your body paragraphs: taste, cost, and nutrition. There are 2 ways to write in a comparison contrast essay. So you can have your thesis statement, the same thesis statement: fruits are better than vegetables because of the taste, cost, and nutrition. Then in paragraph 2, you write about the taste, the cost, and the nutrition of fruit. Then in the paragraph 3, you write about the taste, cost, and nutrition of vegetables. And you put all of this taste, cost, and nutrition of fruits in one paragraph, and then you put vegetables, taste, cost, and nutrition in another paragraph. So this is known as a block method, and that for this kind of, if you use the block method, you only have 4 paragraphs for your essay. If you use the alternate method, which is what we've been using for essay 1, then you would have paragraph 2 would be taste, paragraph 3 would be cost, paragraph 4 would be nutrition, paragraph 5 would be conclusion. And so for your next essay, we will be working with the comparison contrast essay. And so we're going to do that in week 7, week 8, 11, and 12. And so when we write our comparison contrast essay, you will find you have to have different kinds of sentence structure. So you will find in these examples that you can express opposites. So instead of saying but all the time, you can use transition words of opposition. And so a phrase is a group of words with no subject and no verb. A clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. So simple sentence with a transitional phrase. So in contrast to Mary's wealth, John is poor. Mary is rich, but John is poor. Mary is rich, however, John is poor. And then while Mary is rich, John is poor. So all of these are different ways of saying Mary is rich, but John is poor. And so here you have a simple sentence with a transitional phrase. You have a compound sentence with coordinating conjunctions. You have a compound sentence with a transition word, however, and you have a complex sentence with a subordinating conjunction. So you have 4 different ways in which you can say Mary is rich, but John is poor. So these are 4 different ways in which you can vary your sentence structure in your week 8 essay. So transition words in comparison contrast essays. What are transition words? What are conjunctive adverbs or adverbial conjunctions? And so adverbs tell when, where, how, and to what extent an action or verb is done. Conjunctive adverbs or transition words show addition, comparison, contrast, example, summary, and time sequence by linking sentences and paragraphs. Adverbial conjunctions add depth and coherence to text. Oftentimes they act as transition words to help guide a reader through a writer's ideas, signaling a contrast or comparison, or supporting an idea. Adverbs end in ly, but there are exceptions like today and now. The question is, when do we use commas with conjunctive adverbs? Another way of saying conjunctive adverbs are transition words. And so conjunctive adverbs act as comma magnets. Normally we use a comma after a transition word in order to say that we're going to transition to another idea. And so when you have transition words of emphasis, undoubtedly, unquestionably, obviously, especially, clearly, importantly, absolutely, definitely, without a doubt, indeed, it should be noted. And then transition words of addition, which are different ways of saying and, along with, apart from this, moreover, furthermore, also to, as well as that, besides, in addition, not only but also, in addition to this. And then transition words of contrast, which are different ways of saying but. So unlike, nevertheless, on the other hand, in spite of, despite, in contrast to, contrary to, whereas, alternatively, even so, differing from. And then transition words of order, following, at this time, previously, second, third, finally, above all, before, last but not least, first and foremost. And so you can use the transition words of order in between your paragraphs. You would say first, fruits are better tasting. Second, fruits are cheaper. And third, fruits have more nutrition. That sort of thing. So here you could say first, second, and third between your body paragraphs. So why do we use transition words? When we write a comparison-contrast essay, we are comparing the differences or similarities between two topics. Transitional expression gives writing coherence. That is, they help you to move smoothly from one idea to the next. In addition, a variety of transition words add interest to the essay. In this lesson, we will practice using transition words that will give your comparison-contrast interest. Transition words easily allows the reader to follow your ideas or arguments from one point to the next. Examples of transition words include coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and conjunctive adverbs. When we transition from one paragraph to another, we can use these transition words. Example thesis: cats are better than dogs because cats are more independent, semicolon, cats do not bark, semicolon, and cats are easier to maintain. And then you could use your transition words of order. First, cats are more independent. Second, cats do not bark like dogs. So as you go from one paragraph to the next, you can use first, second, and third chronological transition words or transition words of time. Also, as you transition from the last sentence of one paragraph to the first topic sentence of the next paragraph, you can use a transition word of similarity or a transition word of opposition. In the example above, I used a transition word of opposition. In the following section, I will talk about how you can use different kinds of transition words. So transition words of similarity means when you compare two things, they are the same. So New Orleans attracts many tourists. In the same way, San Francisco attracts many tourists. New Orleans attracts many tourists. Similarly, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Like San Francisco, New Orleans attracts many tourists. So just like New Orleans, or just like San Francisco, New Orleans attracts many tourists. And so these are all different ways of saying that both are the same. Okay, so you could say in the same way, similarly, like, and just like, which have all the same meaning. And I will not read out the sentence. I'll just say likewise, in the same manner, by the same token. And these are all different ways of saying when two things are alike. Now we're going to have something called additive transition words, which are like transition words of addition, and that they're different ways of saying and. So Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas, and it is an exporter of oil. So instead of using and in your essay, you could say furthermore, moreover, likewise, in addition, also. So you could say Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Furthermore, it is an exporter of oil. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Moreover, it is an exporter of oil. and so on and so forth. Likewise, in addition and also. Then you have many different ways. Transition words of opposition and difference are different ways to say but. Mary is rich, but John is poor. Mary is rich, however, John is poor. Mary is rich in contrast, John is poor. In contrast to John, Mary is rich. Mary is rich, conversely, John is poor. Mary is rich, on the contrary, John is poor. On the one hand, Mary is rich, on the other hand, John is poor. Mary is rich, on the other end of the spectrum, John is poor. Unlike Mary, who is rich, John is poor. So there are many different ways in which you can say but. And there are more ways to say but than there is to say and, interestingly. Mary is rich. Dissimilarly, John is poor. Mary's wealth differs from John's poverty. A clear difference between the two is Mary's wealth and John's poverty. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. Even though Mary is rich, John is poor. Mary is rich while John is poor, and so on and so forth. So while, yet, nevertheless, unlike, and compared to. And interestingly, when you have although and even though and while, these are not transition words. These are actually subordinating conjunctions acting like transition words. And so when you use subordinating conjunctions, you have a complex sentence, because here you have a dependent clause and an independent clause, a dependent clause and an independent clause. And so here you have, and then here, whenever you see this, and then when you have a dependent clause at the beginning of the sentence, you have a comma, and then when the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, there should be no comma there. But anyway, so Mary is rich, semicolon, nevertheless, and this should have a comma over here, because every time you have a transition word, you always have to have a comma afterwards. When you have a coordinating conjunction, like fanboys, you have the comma before the fanboys, as in compound sentence. Unlike Mary, John is poor. And so unlike Mary is an introductory phrase. And therefore, when you have an introductory phrase at the beginning of the sentence, you have to have a comma. Compared to Mary's wealth, this is also an introductory phrase that takes a comma. And when the introductory phrase is at the beginning of the sentence, we use a comma. And here you have transition words in simple sentences. And so here, all of these transition words are simple sentences. And here, the simple sentence talks about things that are the same. Similar to New Orleans, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Just like New Orleans, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Here you have simple sentences, because a simple sentence means that you have an introductory phrase, then you have subject, verb, object. Introductory phrase, subject, verb, object. So that is a simple sentence. And then here you have simple sentences of difference. Different from Mary, John is poor. Compared to Mary, John is poor. Unlike Mary, John is poor. So if you're writing about different from dogs, cats do not bark. Different from adulthood, during childhood, one plays all day. Different from movies, books hold more detail. So I think, and different from hot weather, cold weather is better. So does everybody understand so far what I'm doing? Does everybody understand so far?
Yes.
Yes? Is this helpful so far? So instead of saying as a child, as a child, as a child, what are different ways, without looking at it, what are different ways in which you can say childhood is better than adulthood? Chantal, what's another way of saying childhood is better than adulthood?
You can say
You would look up
Go
ahead.
Why am I losing my train of thought?
You're not supposed to lose your train of thought at your age. That's for people. That's for people older that do that.
I am older. I'm older.
Oh, you're not older than me.
No, I'm not older than you, but I am older.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So what's another way of saying that?
You can say, say that again. What's the question?
If I said childhood is better than adulthood. Anybody can help her? So I'll put the share screen up. That'll give away the answer.
No, don't put the screen up. Don't put the screen up.
I would say, like, unlike childhood, adulthood, you get to do more things or something like that.
Yes. So you would say, unlike dogs, cats do not bark, or something like that. Unlike movies, books have more depth. You could also use however as well. So the kid sounds very cute. Whose kid is that?
I think Chantel.
Mine, Chantel.
How old is he or she?
He'll be 2 next month.
Wow. Sounds very happy. Okay,
Yeah.
so childhood, unlike adulthood, childhood, everybody does everything for you. So that's basically different from childhood. Everybody does everything for you, or something like that. And so adulthood is different from childhood. Adulthood is filled with responsibilities. So that way you don't have to say better than or worse than. So you could memorize that. So you could say, in contrast to childhood, adulthood is filled with responsibilities. Contrary to adulthood, childhood is so much better. I had so much more fun when I was a kid. Despite Mary's wealth, John is poor. Despite the responsibilities of adulthood, childhood, that doesn't track. Oh well. Anyway, so you get the idea. Different ways of saying a contrast. And so you could say childhood is fun, yet adulthood is not fun, or adulthood is filled with responsibilities, yet childhood is not filled with responsibilities. And so basically you can vary the way in which you write your topic sentences, so that if someone is writing about childhood is better than adulthood, you're not going to say, as a child I paid no bills. As a child I played with my friends. As a child I had no adult responsibilities. This is very common for somebody to write for their topic sentences. So here you would say, unlike adulthood, childhood is filled with child play, or something like that. So, or childhood is fun, but adulthood is not fun, whatever it is. So childhood is filled with free time, yet adulthood is filled with responsibilities. And then you have, I think this one is friends versus family. Everybody had friends versus family. So unlike friends, family sticks by a person. Notice I try not to say sticks by you. Or unlike family, friends can be chosen. Okay, stuff like that. So you could write many different ways of but instead of saying but. And so here you have different ways of transition words of similarity and contrast, but using compound sentences. So here, before I was using here, these are all simple sentences, different ways of saying something is different from something else. And now we're going to have compound sentences where something is different than something else, or something is similar to something else. So Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas, and it is an exporter of oil. So you have different ways of saying and using a compound sentence. So you have an independent clause, transition word, independent clause. Independent clause, transition word, independent clause. So these are all similarly. New Orleans, these are all compound sentences. And then here, many different ways of saying things that are different using compound sentences. And so when if you're going to use this structure, then you're going to remember to put in the semicolon, then you put the transition word, then you put a comma. If you want to put a period here, then you have to remember to capitalize however. In other words, the first word. So Mary is rich, however, John is poor. Mary is rich in contrast. These are all different ways of saying but. So instead of saying but, you would say in contrast, nevertheless, dissimilarly, conversely, on the one hand, on the other hand, Mary is rich. On the other end of the spectrum, John is poor. Mary is rich. On the contrary, John is poor. And then when you write your in-text citation, so everyone has to have one in-text citation for their second essay. So you have P is the main point from the thesis. So you're going to use pie structure. I stands for in-text citation. So 70% of millennials love Star Trek over Star Wars because of Star Trek's optimistic outlook on the future. And so that's about as long as your in-text citation will get to. It's just two or three lines in the middle of your paragraph, usually right after your topic sentence. Then after you write your in-text citation, then you write a paraphrase, and you explain that in-text citation in 5 sentences in your own words. So you write about this particular in-text citation in 5 sentences. So in that way, when you use pie structure, you're going to have 20% in-text citation. If you use one in-text citation per paragraph, then you have 20% in-text citation, and 80% will be your original paper. This way you manage to have an original paper and not just regurgitate other people's sources. So that's what you're going to do for essay 2. Now transition words, so we've gone over transition words in compound sentences, and gone over transition words in simple sentences. Now we're going to go over transition words in complex sentences. So when we use subordinating conjunctions, this means one sentence is not as important as another sentence. And so subordinating conjunctions are also known as adverbial clauses of contrast. I tell you that so you can look it up and Google it if you want to know more. And so use a comma when the dependent clause starts the sentence. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. And so here I'm going to test you. Which one is this? Is this although Mary is rich, John is poor? Is this a simple, compound, or complex sentence? Although John is poor, Mary is rich. Is that a simple, compound, or complex sentence?
Is it complex?
All right, you got it. You're the expert on sentence structure. Okay. And if I said Mary is rich, yet John is poor, what kind of sentence is that? Anybody else?
Compound.
It's compound. Yes, you got it correct. Yes, compound, because you have an independent clause joined by fanboys and independent clause. Mary is rich, however, John is poor. Is this a compound sentence or a complex sentence or a simple sentence? Crickets. I mean, nobody knows. So here you have one independent clause. You have, well, it's not quite fanboys, but it is a compound sentence, even though it's not fanboys. So this is a compound sentence because it's got an independent clause, transition word, and an independent clause. It's still considered a compound sentence. Okay, this one. In contrast to Mary's wealth, John is poor. Is this a simple sentence, compound sentence, or a complex sentence? In contrast to Mary's wealth, John is poor. What kind of sentence is that?
Is that simple?
That's a simple sentence. You guys are now experts at sentence structure. Good. In Mary is rich. On the other hand, John is poor. Is this a simple sentence, compound sentence, or a complex sentence? It also has the wrong punctuation that nobody noticed. It's supposed to go like this. Now that's correct. I was probably teaching another class and I made it wrong on purpose. That was a comma splice. Anyway, Mary is rich. On the other hand, John is poor. Everyone got stuck on that. This is a compound sentence. So whenever you have an independent clause plus a transition word plus an independent clause, that is a compound sentence. I'm guessing I didn't teach that before. I think I only taught it as fanboys. Unlike Mary's wealth, John is poor. Is this a simple sentence, compound sentence, or a complex sentence?
Is it complex?
Nope. Anybody try again? Unlike Mary's wealth. Unlike Mary's wealth, John is poor. Jasmine?
Complex.
That's what I said.
That's what Hassan said.
Oh, sorry, simple.
Yes, it is simple.
Simple.
It's a simple sentence because it's got an introductory phrase and then subject and verb. So here you have an introductory phrase, like a prepositional phrase, and then you have John is poor. Do you know the difference between a phrase and a clause? What's the difference between a phrase and a clause? We went over that in the very beginning. So anybody? What's the difference between a phrase and a clause? Because if you have a clause at the beginning of the sentence, then it becomes a complex sentence. And if you have a clause at the beginning of the sentence, then it becomes a simple sentence. You see? And it's important to know that, to note the differences so that you know how to combine your sentences later on when you want to make a compound complex sentence later on. So does anybody, any questions? No. Okay. So I will continue with this. And so here, now we're going to have a whole bunch of complex sentences, okay? Because you have because Mary is rich. So here this is a phrase. I'm sorry, this is a clause. A clause has a subject and a verb. Here, no subject, no verb. Unlike, well, actually it's got no verb. So here, you got to have a subject and a verb in order for it to be a clause. So this is a dependent clause because it is a thought that cannot stand by itself. You cannot say because Mary is rich. That's a sentence fragment. So in order for you to complete that sentence, you have to say because Mary is rich, and then you have to add an independent clause. So this is a what kind of sentence again? I just said it earlier. When you have a dependent clause and an independent clause together, what kind of sentence is that?
I think you said what?
Yeah, that's what I said. Excellent. And so the dependent clause is less important than the independent clause. Whereas when you have a compound sentence like in this one, both sentences have the same and equal significance. So if you're going to read it, you would say Mary is rich, however John is poor. But if you're going to have a subordinating conjunction or dependent clause, you would say because Mary is rich, John is poor. So that means that you have one dependent clause. This sentence is not that important, but this sentence is emphasized and is important. That sort of thing. So that's the difference between a compound sentence and a complex sentence. And if you have a dependent clause at the beginning of your sentence, then you have a comma. So because Mary is rich, comma, even though Mary is rich, comma. So always have a comma at the beginning of your, when the dependent clause comes at the beginning of your sentence. Whereas Mary is rich, John is poor. So no need for commas when the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, with the exception of who, which, where, whom, and that sort of thing. John, who is French, speaks French, or lives in Paris. So here when you have who, which, where, and that, then you have two commas when it comes in front of when the phrase is in the beginning of the sentence, and then you only have one comma when the phrase comes at the end of the sentence. So that's only for who, whom, which, and that. Then you have transition words of summary. These are usually used in the conclusion paragraph or in your right before your conclusion sentence. All things considered, to summarize. In short, to sum up, all in all. So here, let's practice. Some people are fat, some people are thin. So what are different ways of saying some people are fat and some people are thin? Using what we just learned. What are different ways of saying some people are fat and some people are thin? Anybody?
Some people may appear thinner than others.
Okay. Now use the word however. How would you put these two sentences together using however?
I guess some people are thin, however, some people may appear bigger.
Yeah, some people may appear bigger, and however, some people may appear smaller. Yeah, if you want to avoid the word fat and thin, I get the feeling that's not very politically correct, is it? Unlike fat people, thin people are blah, 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 blah. You could also use the words conversely, or what other words can you use besides conversely, in contrast? What were the other contrastive transition words? Do you remember? Without looking at the paper, eventually, if you use these transition words enough, you will have it memorized. Unlike living in the country, unlike living in my home country, living in the U.S., I eat a lot of junk food. Unlike dating online, dating face-to-face is much easier to meet people. Unlike dogs, cats are fun to play with. Unlike home-cooked foods, restaurant food is more nutritious. So I used unlike, and now I'm going to say cold weather is better for me, whereas warm weather is not better for me, or something like that. So you could use whereas, but. So this is different ways in which you can say, and then there's more transition words, different ways of saying if. So when you have transition words of cause, condition, and purpose, these transitional phrases present specific conditions or intentions. So instead of saying if all the time, you could say John always knows where the emergency exits are if he needs to leave the building, or if there is a fire. So instead of saying if, you would say in case of a fire, for the purpose of what to do in a fire, in the event that there is a fire, or so as long as John knows where the emergency exits are, he will be able to safely exit the building when there is a fire. And so as long as is another way of saying if. On the condition that there is also another way of saying if, because you would say if there is a fire, or on the condition that there is a fire, it is important for John to know where the emergency exits are located. In the hope that John can safely exit the building, John needs to know where the emergency exits are located. So if John can safely exit the building, John needs to know where the emergency exits are located. And so in case there is a fire, if, so this in case there means if there is a fire, John needs to know where the emergency exits are located. In order for John to safely exit the building, John needs to know where the emergency exits are located in case of a fire. So here you have in case of a fire and in order for. You actually have two different ways of saying if in the same. So these are all different ways of saying if. And then transition words of support and emphasis, which is similar to different ways of saying and. In 2020, many people were not aware of the seriousness of COVID-19. For example, students at USC were caught having large parties, not wearing masks or social distancing. And so here you would have and. Okay, so instead of saying and, you will say for example. In other words, to put it differently. So these are all different ways of saying and. Okay, and then you would say as an illustration. To put it another way, for this reason, for instance, in fact, students at USC were caught having large parties, not wearing masks. As a matter of fact. So all of these are also different ways of saying and, in which you support one in the same way as something is similar, and you just want to emphasize the second sentence as the way you do with and. So these are also known as transition words of addition. And then you have transition words of effect. These are different ways of saying because. So instead of saying because, or instead of saying then, okay? So instead of saying then and because all the time, you could say, therefore, in 2020, many people thought COVID-19 was a hoax. Therefore, people did not wear masks and did not social distance in public, resulting in more COVID-19 outbreaks and deaths. So here you would say, instead of saying then, you would say therefore, as a result, under those circumstances, in that case, for this reason, then, consequently, hence, accordingly. So anytime you feel like saying then you would use all of these different kinds of transition words. And then for transition words of conclusion, this is when these transition words conclude, summarize, and restate ideas or indicate final general statement. Also, some words like therefore from the effect consequence category can be used to summarize. These transition words are usually used towards the end of a paragraph as you transition into the next paragraph, or it's used at the beginning of your conclusion paragraph as you conclude your essay. So examples include, to conclude, we are lucky that there are now vaccines to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. In the final analysis, in closing, to summarize, as can be seen above, given these points, there should be an S there, given these points, in the long run, as has been noted, in conclusion, in short, and you could also have in summary. Okay, so I didn't get to write that one in. But so this is when you write at the beginning of at the end of your body paragraph, and then at the beginning of your conclusion paragraph. Everybody got that? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Transition words of time, chronology. Does anyone want me to back up or slow down? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Transition words of time. So transition words of time, chronology, and sequence. These transitional words, like finally, have the function of limiting, restricting, and defining time. They can be used alone or as part of adverbial expressions. Today, comma, everyone knows the seriousness of the war in Ukraine. Now, Zelensky is fighting to save his country. I think I just updated this recently. Yeah, this used to have stuff about, COVID-19. At the present time, Putin has invaded Ukraine. From time to time, the news broadcasts the casualties of Ukraine. Sooner or later, I hope there will be peace between Ukraine and Russia. In due time, there will be world peace. To begin with, it will take a lot of effort to get Zelensky and Putin to negotiate a treaty. Up to the present time, the war continues between Ukraine and Russia. As soon as there is peace between Ukraine and Russia, the world can celebrate and world economies can recover. Eventually, Putin and Zelensky will strike a deal for peace. And so many transition words in the time category, consequently, first, second, third, further, hence, henceforth, since then, when, and whenever, have other uses. And so in your case, you can use these transition words of chronology either in between your sentences in your body paragraphs or between your body paragraphs. Usually you just have about 2 or 3 transition words per paragraph. You don't have to have a transition word after every single paragraph because that would be way too choppy. Yeah. So how can we use transition words to transition from one paragraph to another? So in these paragraphs, I use pie structure, but I also use transition words in the conclusion to pivot from one paragraph to another. Transition words are sometimes called connecting words. Transition words help us connect sentences to each other, ideas to each other, and to connect paragraphs to each other. Using transition words help our essay flow smoothly. You do not need transition words. Yes, Donald. Oh, okay. You just came on. All right. You do not need to use...
Yeah, I'm just here. I just got in.
Oh, okay. So welcome to the class. And so you do not need to use transition words after every single sentence. Use them sparingly. Notice I use only 1 or 2 transition words per paragraph. Otherwise, if you use too many transition words, your paragraph sounds artificial and clunky. So here you have a typical pie structure paragraph. So when you write your essay and you want to put in your in-text citation, so here I have the first sentence. So here's the example thesis. Smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So that's your thesis. Then paragraph 2 is going to be about lung cancer. So P in pie structure stands for main point from thesis. So the main point from the thesis is smoking causes lung cancer. Then you have your one in-text citation. So you would say 70% of smokers who start smoking young end up dying of lung cancer. Then you have to remember to have a beginning quotation mark and an ending quotation mark for a direct quote, and then you have to have the author's name, the date, and the page number. Now, the rest of this paragraph is just going to be about you explaining why you chose this particular in-text citation. So basically, the rest of the paragraph explains the in-text citation. So in this in-text citation, Dr. Smith explains that if as a teenager a person starts smoking due to peer pressure, a person has a high chance of dying of lung cancer. And Dr. Smith claims that the majority of lung cancer deaths can be avoided if people do not start smoking at a young age or if people quit smoking. If someone offers a teenager a cigarette, politely refuse them. In addition, so you notice that instead of and, in addition, lung cancer is not the only, okay, here I'm transitioning into my next paragraph. So here I have my concluding sentence is transitioning to the next paragraph. So in addition, lung cancer is not the only cancer a person can get from smoking. In addition, in other words, you can also get, a person can also get throat cancer. So as I start mentioning throat cancer, why am I mentioning throat cancer? Because second, besides lung cancer, smoking causes throat cancer. So here I say that there's more than one cancer you can get besides lung cancer, and then that's me, my last sentence, transitioning using in addition, and then I transition from the last sentence of the previous paragraph to the topic sentence of the next paragraph, in which I follow the same thing. I have P is besides lung cancer, smoking causes throat cancer. So we get that throat cancer is from the thesis statement. Then we have I for our in-text citation. So we would say throat cancer is a common ailment found among heavy smokers. Smith, 2020, page 22. So that would be I as an in-text citation. Then you have an explanation of that in-text citation for the rest of your paragraph. Well, Dr. Smith claims that throat cancer is prevalent among heavy smokers because the nicotine in the smoke damages the throat muscles. And then you can use an anecdote. Betty ended up for your body paragraph. So here you would have some kind of case study. Betty ended up with throat cancer. Smoking destroyed her throat so badly that she has to smoke through a tube. Dr. Smith treats patients like Betty all the time. He warned young people not to take up smoking. Furthermore, see, I'm using an and instead of saying and. Furthermore, he warns adults to quit smoking as soon as possible. Then we use things like finally, in conclusion. To summarize, these would be the transition words of conclusion used before the last sentence of a paragraph as you pivot to the next paragraph. Finally, the last kind of cancer a person can get from smoking is stomach cancer. And then third, the most serious kind of cancer, stomach cancer, is caused by excessive smoking. And so my last sentence transitions into the first sentence of the next paragraph. And that all comes from this particular thesis statement that smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So that's how you can use transition words to transition from the last sentence of the first paragraph of the previous paragraph into the first sentence of the next paragraph. I think I said that right. Yeah. And so then at the end of your paper, you would write your reference citation and not just your web address, which I'm still seeing these kind of mistakes where people are just putting references and then a web address. That's not correct. If you're going to put a reference citation, you need to put the author name, the date, the article name, where you got it from, the edition, the publication date, the date that you retrieved it. So you retrieved, today's date is May 31st. Wow, I can't believe it's almost June. It went so fast. May 31st from 2023 from www. whatever your database is address. And so that is a correct, and make sure that you have left hanging indent and that your references are in alphabetical order. And so here you have your week 8 discussion where you're going to rewrite your essay. People are doing a good job at it too. So you're doing a really good job. And then you should label if you are using the block or alternate method for your rough draft. So you're going to be using the block or alternate method. So now I'm going to be moving to week 9. Did I go to everything too fast? Everything good? Everything good to go? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to go back and then I'm going to go over week 9. Week 9, you're going to be doing a persuasive essay. So in a persuasive argument, you want to convince the reader of your point of view on a controversial topic, and you want to convince the reader that your point of view is correct. You can use counter argument, that is, point out what the other side says and then rebut what the other side says with your argument to make your argument more powerful and more convincing. Now this is going to be the structure of your post. You're going to have one introduction paragraph, one body paragraph, and one conclusion paragraph. If we were writing an essay, I would have you write 5, but since this is just a post, then you just need to write one introduction, one body paragraph, one conclusion, and that's it. All right? And then each of the main body paragraphs supports the thesis. Notice how that's just like these columns support the main idea. So you can have this visual for how you are going to find evidence to support your main idea. So and you got to find credible evidence using Kapow. So I'm going to go over Kapow more in your week 10. That's for your week 10 lecture. Here are some examples. I'll let you guys read it through on your own. I'm not going to read this, but in those days I told people that they'd have to do 5. So that's how come everybody did 5. So this is from past students and people who forgot to put in their in-text citations. Notice how this person had an entire, this studies from. Do we put web addresses in the middle of our essay? No, we put web addresses in our reference citation. So this is, and here he forgot his in-text citation. He says the average American spends about $1,200 a month on prescription drugs. And if the person has cancer, that cost can, go up to $10,000. Anyway, so if you have any kind of numbers, you have to put in quotation marks, and you have to put author, date, and number. Then she wrote the cost of medical marijuana can be between $200 and $400 a month. And once again, no in-text citation. So whenever you use any kind of number, you have to put in the author, the date, and the page number. And we do not put web addresses in the middle of our essay. Instead, you want to put the author's name. So you would say Dr. Smith and that sort of thing. So you don't say studies from this. You would say Dr. Smith study. You have to put the author's name or the website name. And here, you don't say studies include, research shows, experts say. What experts? What research? What studies? That's just too vague. So you always have to name the author's name, the date, and the page number. So you would say Smith 2020 states, that sort of thing. Then you would believe it. So any article that just says research show, which is what commercials do all the time, then you know not to believe it. Because anybody could be the doctor. I could just say, oh, all the doctors say that Dentyne is a great gum to chew. And so then you know not to believe it. Okay, so that's how come Wikipedia is filled with stuff like that, because they don't have in-text citations. If something does not have in-text citations, then you don't believe the article. And this is why we don't use Wikipedia in our sources. And so here are some persuasive essay topics that you can choose, or you can go to procon.org, which is next week. So next week you can go to procon.org to choose your what you want to write about. So here, this is actually taken from procon.org. I'm not going to read that through, but there's plenty to choose from. And our book bans ethical? Or did President Biden do a good job evacuating Americans from Afghanistan? I could tell I put this in last August because that's the last time I updated this. This is very old. Should Putin have invaded Ukraine? Why or why not? How is the Taiwan situation different from or the same as the Ukraine situation? Okay, because President Xi wants to invade Taiwan, and right now Taiwan is its own country, but President Xi thinks of Taiwan as part of China, just like Putin thinks of Ukraine as part of Russia. That's why they want to invade it. And both Taiwan and Ukraine consider themselves their own country. It's almost as if Canada thinks of the United States as part of Canada, and therefore Canada would want to invade the United States. How would you feel if some other country came and said, oh no, you're ours, and you're like, no, we're American, we're not Canadian, or something like that. So that's that one. Should Puerto Rico be granted statehood, and all of that. So that's the end of all of this. And then if you have any questions, you can just go to procon.org. And then next week, and that's it. Next week, I will go over 3 kinds of persuasive essays. I will go over in more detail what is a persuasive essay. I will also go over how to use a counter argument and a rebuttal paragraph to avoid bias in your paper so that you can have a fair and balanced persuasive post. Now, it's up to you if you want to do the counter argument and rebuttal, because that's hard. So it's up to you if you want to try that out. To avoid bias, we have to tell both sides of an issue. So we can strengthen our argument by adding what the other point of view. So that's the purpose of a counter argument and rebuttal paragraph, is that when you mention the other side, then you rebut the other side and you strengthen your argument. And then if you're able to show that you can rebut the other side, that means you show to the reader that your argument is valid because you're able to say to the other side, you're wrong. Because the purpose of a persuasive essay is to persuade the reader that only your side is correct. And so when we add the other side to our argument, this helps us avoid bias and cherry-picking fallacy. We'll go over all of that in week 10. What's a fallacy? What's bias? Actually, week 10, I'll go over more about fallacies and bias. And week 9, I'm just going to go over more about different kinds of persuasive essays. And so just to start you out, there are 3 kinds of persuasive essays. The first kind of persuasive essay is a position paper, in which you have to take a position. And next week when you write your persuasive post, you need to take a side. You don't say, there are pros and cons to abortion. That's incorrect. You have to take a side. You're either for or against whatever your topic is. You're either for gun control or against gun control because. So you make a claim and then you tell the reasons why that claim is true. So that's a position paper. So that's the first kind of persuasive essay. The second kind of persuasive essay is a call to action persuasive essay. And the most famous one is I Have a Dream. That was a call to action by Martin Luther King to get people to get off their sofa and then to protest the injustices of racism. So his essay is the best call to action persuasive essay. Problem solution persuasive essay is you state the problem and then you state the solution. So that's similar to making a proposal. And then you make a proposal where you state the problem, and then you have a solution where you pass a law to solve that problem. And so those are the 3 kinds. You're going to be doing mainly position paper. That's the easiest. The very first kind of persuasive essay is the easiest, the most basic, and that is you state a position on a issue, and then you tell the reader why that is. And that is it. So start thinking now about what you're going to write about for next week. So that if you have no idea what you're interested in, now is a good time to go to procon.org and then go trolling and see what you're interested in writing about. Because that's going to be for your post. So that's had nothing to do with your comparison contrast essay. We will come back to the comparison contrast essay in week 11 and 12. And no, I did not write this class like that. No, I don't know why they wrote it like this. The school did. If you have no questions, I'll see you next week. Somebody already knew the drill. She already left, so you already know the drill. So I'll see you next week, and when I will talk about more, what is a persuasive essay? Do you have any questions about this class?
No.
No, all right. So that means you're all doing fine. And so I'll see you all next week, and have a great week.